everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curless.
And welcome to The Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Oh, Elaine, this week we have David Crosby. Did you know David Crosby had a son?
No.
Did you know David Crosby had a band with his son in it?
No.
Oh, well, I didn't either until fairly recently. And it turns out that, yes, I don't know the exact story. You'll have to get on the interwebs, listeners, and figure it out for yourself. But something along the lines of this grown human just shows up in his life one day and declares that he is his son, and they find out he's his son. And not only is he a son of his, but he's very musical, and they decide to have a band. Why not?
Okay, so you went from he had a son to he had a son that he discovered way later.
Yep.
Okay, that's a different story.
Way later. Yeah, it's a way different story, isn't it?
It totally is.
It's a good lead for this episode. And they were called CPR, the initials of the three main founders of the band. And the song this week from them is called Breathless.
Okay, I'm looking forward to listening to this. So before we get into it, can you remind all of us how we should be listening to music as members of the Musician's Loop community?
Well, we love to encourage you to just improve your listening situation if you can. We walk through this life quite often, quite frankly, blessed with the amazing technology anymore that you can get pretty great sound out of pretty minuscule speakers. But we don't take the time to improve it if we can. So just if you have a moment to stop and put on the better headphones or get to the good speakers, please do so. We highly encourage it. And as always, we are thrilled that you are listening to us regardless of the way that you are doing it. So thank you for bringing us into your ears in whatever way you are. We appreciate it.
All right, so we are going to go ahead and leave the links to this song in the show notes, and we'll be right back. And we're back. Oh, wow. That one was really, really interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I think it's cool, even though it's obviously not all the same and it's just one of the three voices from Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and it's not the same exact kind of songs or harmonies. Still, there's something about that character of David Crosby's voice in there that does catch your ear a little bit every once in a while. Like, oh, yes, I do know the sound of that voice in a bunch of harmonies. So I thought that's really cool.
In listening to this, one of the things that really struck me was how musical things were. Like the harmonies were really, really tight. Sometimes when you hear harmonies, they're a little bit sloppy, but this was incredible. Just thinking about how on each one of the harmonies was and how precise things were. And so just as a vocalist, someone who has sung in a lot of vocal ensembles, it was incredible to hear.
Yeah, I think just unexpected for me too. When I first heard them, I don't know if I was expecting those particular voicings or those particular chords. They're not like super unusual or weird, but just different enough from what I was expecting, which is always great. I like some of the twists and turns of the chord changes.
I want to focus on the chord changes because that was one of the most interesting things for me. I felt like every fourth chord was a surprise for me. And that was something that I loved. And it was a surprise, not that it was out of the key, but that it just went someplace that I didn't expect. Yeah. And I didn't feel like there was a consistency in it. It was like turning the corner in a maze and recognizing some kind of really surprising topiary. And I was just thinking about how delightful it was to listen to something just so interesting.
I just like so many aspects of it. I like the instrumentation. I like the colors of those chords. I like the riff that it goes back to in the middle. Just a cool vibey intro. Sets up a good vibe for the whole thing, the beginning of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the instrumentation. I marked it down as primarily acoustic instruments, except for that little electric solo in the middle. But it was interesting for me because I think we've been listening to songs that might be a little bit more processed, and this one sounded a lot less processed. We're
Indeed.
talking almost a traditional jazz trio plus an acoustic guitar, and then in the middle, the electric guitar comes out.
Yeah.
What else did you hear in there?
I was expecting maybe there'd be more later, but I liked the little pizzicato string parts at the beginning, also setting up the vibe. I'm actually now not remembering if I heard them before. I just love the way that that is in there, the way it sets up. And then really just that their voices take up so much of the sonic space. There's not a lot of extra instrumentation needed.
I was listening to the acoustic guitar as well as a pizzicato part. Like that was something that I wrote down. I heard the pizz part the second time around. And for people who don't know, pizzicato is the plucked violin.
It actually could work for any string instrument. Like, they're generally referred to like cello, more orchestral strings, more than like guitar strings. But
Right.
yeah.
That's right. And so as I was listening to that, it caught me by surprise the second time around because I didn't hear it the first time around. And the one thing I heard about the acoustic guitar was that it was mixed very treble. And that was something that I did notice because a lot of the sonic space that you were talking about, the vocals, the piano, the bass was kind of that mid to low range.
It
And the
definitely.
guitar was in this higher range. And it was
Yeah, that makes sense.
only in the higher range. And I think also rhythmically, it was doing something really interesting. It started out with arpeggiation, moved into strumming, switched back to arpeggiation, and then switched back to strumming. And when it was doing the strumming, I felt like that was much more of a rhythmic thing. Like it was holding a rhythmic center as
Sure.
opposed to holding a melodic or a tonal center, even though it is a tonal instrument.
Sure.
So just interesting to think about how the acoustic fits within the context of this song.
Yeah, and that makes sense. The shift in texture, likely with a lot of the instruments like that, you'll do a shift like that to denote the different sections going from verses to choruses.
One of the other things that I did notice as well was the places where it got a lot less busy, where all of a sudden you're holding out notes or something is resonating, you're letting it ring. And that happened a couple of times in the song where it went from very, very busy to very, very open and then back to busy again. And that I think was a part of the texture as well.
That makes sense. As you said, it probably is outlined by what's happening lyrically in those sections.
So one maybe criticism that I would have is that it really did sound very mushy to me in the center between the vocals and the piano. Just felt like it was in the same range for all of it. And it was very hard for me to distinguish lyrics until I had the lyrics right in front of me and was listening for those specific words. Can you
Sure.
talk a little bit about that? And I don't know whether you like it or not, or the role of mixing in how we process music.
Well, also sometimes when you're doing the mix, it's difficult to find a mix that sounds good in as many listening environments as possible, whether it's car stereos, AirPods, small headphones, big headphones, home stereos, trying to make everything even and have good mastering. Even that whole riff, the bum, 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 even that just carries a lot of low end with it in the bass and the piano. Anytime you're doubling those low parts of the piano and the bass, and then it's male voices. So even if the literal notes aren't down there with it, something about those vibrations in the lower mid range would be a problem I would have to deal with all those years touring with the group Straight No Chaser. I was be their tour engineer, and it's 10 male voices a cappella, and almost every room normally has tones build up right in the low mid range. A lot of times I used to joke without hearing anything, I could just kind of cut a bunch of that range out. And sometimes I was so used to that a song or two in, I would realize just by habit I had dumped so much of it. I'm like listening and think, man, why does the show sound so thin today? Because I just assumed that the room was going to sound like that. So all that to say that when the lead vocal happens in the same place, even though there are tricks you can do to try to pull that out and make it more discernible, it is a place where you can run into trouble hearing a lyric pop out or a melodic instrument that lives in that area that you want to stand out. You have to do lots of other tricks in the mix to get it to stand out in front of the rest.
Like what happened with the acoustic.
Yeah, in that instance, I'm sure the full range of that guitar probably also dumped down into there. And they're like, okay, yeah, we have plenty of that. Let's just cut a bunch of that thinner and let's accentuate the top. That sounds right to me.
And the right hand of the piano was right around middle C, which
Mhm.
is pretty much in the middle of the tenor range
Yeah.
as well. So the lead vocal was sitting right on top of where the piano was playing.
That's true. It does. And that's probably also why even just the little high harmonic parts of that pizzicato thing at the top, it just introduces, hey, don't forget there's going to be sound up here too eventually. Just wait. Almost an acknowledgement. Somewhere in the song, we need some high frequency things happening.
One of the other things that I heard that I think fed into the sense of mushiness was how much sustain pedal was in the piano. It had that round sound of an actual piano. So it wasn't thin at all, but you heard that ringing. You heard the sustain pedal. And for those of you who aren't familiar with piano, when you hold down the sustain pedal, it takes all of the pads off of the string. So it begins to ring inside of the piano itself. And so the sound just keeps on going until you let go of the damper and then press it down again for that next sense of ringing. And I think that ringing also fed into that sense of, well, there's a lot going on and it's all in the same register. And it's really hard for me to distinguish the words and distinguish the
Sure.
voices.
And I suppose creatively, it could be even a conscious choice like, okay, are we going to forsake the intelligibility of every single lyric for the vibe and the sound that we want? Because it has a vibe about it, a very particular sound signature, just that low mid, almost creepy, spooky kind of vibe a little bit. And if that's what is paramount, then sometimes that might win out over you understanding all the words on this one line.
So as we're talking about the instrumentation, let's talk a little bit about the rhythm, because I felt like rhythm was such a key part of this song itself. Can you talk about the beginning? You were talking about the riff that you really liked and the rhythm that you really liked.
I just like the riff. It's very simple, but I like when a riff like that can be effective. I know that most of the listeners know what I'm talking about, but on this, it's the doo 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 that happens at several places. It returns to that. It's like a little returning theme. The riff is just a great setup. Like before any singing happens, it's just like, ooh, okay, I can't wait. What's gonna happen? Like I'm sitting at the edge of my seat the way that little theme comes through. You're anticipating what the lyric's gonna do.
The other thing that I wanted to point out was the rhythm itself, so the drums itself. It really sounded almost like a heartbeat for me. I don't know if you caught that as well, but it had this very human heartbeat kind of sound to me. And I felt like that rhythm really helped me anchor into the song in a particular way.
And this whole thing is got a very particular way that the vocal sits in with the rhythm section. It's not a typical absolutely in the pocket kind of a time, which I think also helps to create the interest in it.
Let's talk a little bit about the lyrics, because I think you're right in that they do fit into the music in a very particular way. But one thing that I did notice, and this is again a pet peeve of mine, I think anyone who's listened to this knows that I am all about staying on meter and making sure that the meter matches both the words and the melody. Songwriter pet peeve. But this one did not. This one definitely made meter choices that were a bit unusual, which I guess, given the context of the song, makes sense.
Are you talking about how the words are married to the melody?
When I think about meter, I think about the emphasis of a particular word. If I think about which syllable of the word has the emphasis, has the downbeat, a lot of times that does map to the melody, and it maps to what is considered the downbeat. And so if you have an emphasis on a part of the word that we don't normally have a downbeat on as we are actually saying it out loud, that to me means that it's off meter. And so in
Okay.
this one, there were melodic choices that emphasize parts of the word that were not natural, not the way that you would normally speak in American English.
That happens in songs sometimes. It's just kind of like there was no really good choice. Whenever I hear that, I put myself in the songwriter and or the singer's spot and I go, oh, man, that's so weird the way they do that. As if they just did one option and never thought of it. It's their creation. I go through all the other ways it could be done and usually go through a whole cycle of them and go, Yep, the one they chose is the only one that really kind of works. Who knew that the artist would do something that just was the best that they could get away with in that moment?
You're talking about like what you are particular about. That's the kind of thing that drives me nuts. Knowing that I actually struggle with choosing the right word that fits into the meter, that's actually a big part of the songwriting process for me. And sometimes I'll dump out an entire lyric because it doesn't work rhythmically with what I'm trying to do.
Again, it's for everyone to choose what's paramount. The vibe, the melody, the vowel, the sound, the phrase, the lyric, like what's the most important thing there. So there were some little things like that bug you in this one, huh?
Yeah, it does. But if I take a look at the words themselves, I definitely see a lot of really great artistry here. I think about the use of repetition. I'm seeing the word breathless used multiple times. There's a repetition in the second and fourth line in the chorus itself. And it is also a set of lyrics that are very descriptive. I've talked a bit about the word pictures that lyrics often paint. And because lyrics are such a condensed art form, it is one of those things where you can't paint everything in as many words as you want. You have a limited number of words to describe exactly what you're going for.
Right. That's the trick, right? Try to do that as best you can and as little as possible.
That's right. And so as I take a look at the pre-chorus, I take a look at each one of these verses, it tells you a bit about a feeling. It doesn't tell you about specifics. Like previous songs that we've done have talked very much about specific visuals, and the visual picture helps you to understand what's going on. This one is describing feelings. And so it starts out with this dance we do leaves me breathless. And it really is talking about this metaphorical dance and the fact that the singer is feeling really off balance, right? Reeling on the edge of falling down. But one thing that I found really sweet about this song was the description of the relationship that the singer, or the singers, I guess, have with this other person. And I think about the characters. You have the you, I, and the we. And so it's talking about this relationship that this couple has. It talks about you try to walk in step and stumble laughing. You hold each other up to stop the fall. And I think those two lines in and of itself showed me what type of relationship they were talking about. It's very supportive. If one person falls, you're trying to help the other person up. And at the same time, when you stumble, you're laughing. It's not something where someone stumbles and someone else is angry. And I think about that just in those few words, how it paints the picture of this relationship that is joyful, that is supportive, that is really trying to walk through life together, that's orbiting one another, that's magnetized to one another. What a beautiful thing that is. And so just looking at these lyrics, I would give it definitely like an A minus if I were to grade it, because the meter thing just drives me nuts.
Right.
But I think that there are so many good things about these lyrics that help me feel like there's a lot in there for us to dig into. There's a meatiness in it. I know we've also talked about some songs where it's like what you see is what you get. It's very on the surface. And then there are others that are a lot more artistic or descriptive or lyrical in a way that really touches us deeply. I think this falls into the second.
Yeah, or have multiple layers, multiple things that you can get out of it. I'm curious, did you notice that in the chorus it says a bell once struck, and then the next time it says love is a bell.
Yes.
It doesn't say love is a bell. Love is a bell. So that's an interesting, just because of the way that it's sung. Love is a bell. The word is kind of an uglier thing to sing if it was literally just a sonic choice, because a kind of rings more.
I looked at that and I was like, that's an oxymoron. Because if you hold a bell, it stops ringing. So what do you mean it keeps on ringing? This is my literal self, right? My engineer brain is like, what do you mean? But I think once it got into the metaphor where it said once it starts ringing, closer you get, it gets louder. And I'm like, okay, I'm willing to accept that oxymoron. Now, one thing that I noticed that I don't know if you caught, but at the very, very end, it repeats the third line, that line that you just called out, love is a bell, once strung will ring forever. That forever is a last word, and they hold it out forever. And it's like they're holding out that all the way out to the end.
Yeah, forever
and it's
and
like,
ever.
I don't know, 16 bars later, they're
Right.
still singing that.
And as you said, the piano is held open, the cymbals ring, like, so it could just go on forever. They do everything they can at the end to not stifle anything and to let it do that. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. I enjoy this one.
Right. Well, any last thoughts before we move on?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So with that, we are going to shift over to
The mailbag.
That's right, the mailbag. If you'd love to contribute to the mailbag or just let us know what you think, please email us at themusiciansloop@gmail.com. That's LOUPE. Or you can message us on Instagram or Threads at themusiciansloop.
You can drop us a line and let us know if you've heard this band before, if you actually know more stories about how they were put together or how David Crosby found the son that he didn't know he had. If you have more info about that, please let us know. Or if you just have any other ideas about some things we should cover. So let us know. Those are the places you can get a hold of us. Please do so.
Okay, so this week's mailbag comes from Threads. It's from the Scotty Fraser official, and of course it's Scotty Fraser, from November of 2025. And he writes, I'm no music industry expert here, but I've just got to ask, why is everyone so hung up on getting a record deal and wanting one so bad, especially when many of them out there are basically designed to exploit the artist? There were a lot of responses to this, but I'd love to hear your feedback on it. I think a lot of the feedback will probably be pretty similar.
Something that strikes me is that this is only the end of 25, so it's not like that long ago. It's evolved so much that I don't know anyone hung up on getting a record deal. So many times now, there's not much more they can do for you that you can't do for yourself. Not that it can't be helpful, but I don't feel like I happen to know a lot of bands or musical entities who are hung up on getting a record deal. They're just not. They're hung up on making music and figure out how they're going to distribute it because they can't do it like in the old days when there was record deals. We've talked about this a lot on this show. You're not at the mercy of a record company. Back in the day, you kind of needed the record company because they were also your bank that would loan you the money. You needed the money because it was really difficult to record anything at a high quality. And so you needed money to pay the studio to record something in a high quality. Well, that's changed so much and you can just do it in your bedroom or at your house. So we don't need that part of it. We can make this great art on our own. So we don't need them. And the distribution channels with the internet has all changed. So all that stuff has changed so much. The things that we desire from what a label used to do for us are still the same desires. It's just in some ways become more complicated to find them, but easier that you don't have to have the acceptance of a small number of people that happen to work at one of the few labels to make you be able to do the thing you want to do. You can still do it. You just have to do all the work yourself.
Let's pick that apart a little bit because that was so chock full of information there. Let's start out by, when do you think we made that turn as an industry?
In some ways, it's not fully changed. They're not absolutely gone. There's still some of that thing. And again, the things that they did and do for you are still needed to be done. It's just they're not the ones always doing them. I don't know. It's been 15 or 20 years.
So certainly I understand distribution. It is a lot easier to distribute nowadays. But I also think that there are avenues that most artists don't have access to. I don't know how relevant they are, though. So the types of things that I think a record label or the types of industry connections can get you, like if you walk in and you don't have any industry connections whatsoever, you just have a big social following or something like that, right? Certainly you can directly distribute your music to them. There's also the types of things around Grammys or the other types of award shows that I think also highlight music. Some people certainly follow the awards and say, oh, that's actually a discovery opportunity for people. So television, getting onto shows like placement in shows. Do those also pick up what we would traditionally call an indie type of artist?
Well, here's the thing. What's never changed is you're trying to get your music in places where the most people can hear it. But because there's been a change in places you can hear music, it's not just waiting by the radio with your tape deck for them to play that one song you like so you can hit record and have on your cassette tape from the radio. Or there's not just X number of TV stations with a late night show that have the artists on, which are directly related to the 10 labels that exist that have just a running cool, hey, Warner Brothers, when are you sending your next artists over? It's just like there's a whole system at play. And of course, eventually as it got broken up, we're hearing how there's a lot of pay to play, a lot of money going to a lot of people that aren't the artists just to get the music on certain TV shows, on certain radio shows. Certain radio programmers would have an entire part of a country where if the label paid them enough money, they would feed those songs to the different radio stations in an entire area. That doesn't have anything with the great band from down the street that's amazing, but they don't have that contact. Prior to that, they never left your block. Now they can record it on their own and get the following and get listeners that way. I'm talking in circles here about this, but because the whole thing has changed, there isn't easy plug and play, like get a label, they put it through all the systems, and now it's in all the places where you can hear it. Like there's so many amazing places to find entertainment and have this music placed. That's the trick. Like, is it all streamed? How do you get it in front of people? That's the big trick now.
I think there is a perception that the music label would help you with scale and could also help you with things like marketing, although you could also hire your own staff to do marketing. So that's not something that you definitely need to rely on a label to do.
Yeah, this is a place that a label can still be helpful. They're still functional and still can do incredible things for an artist, but even they have to be creative and figure out new ways, because they don't just have the 3 to 5 spots. They just put something out and wipe their hands of it and it does the work. They have to do, they can be very useful, but they have to be more creative now than ever also.
It's definitely something to think about, especially with what we've been talking about, the democratization. And I think, though, that the whole marketing game is something that is hugely complex. And so if you can rely on experts on this, again, like I said before, that is something that we can just go ahead and learn more and do more and experiment more on our own. So it is just something for us to think about in terms of what is the value? Is it something that even people should aspire to? And what benefit do they bring, especially if you can do it yourself? And maybe it is one of those things where it just allows you to concentrate more on just making music and being in the right place at the right time, and someone else manages your time. And that also comes with downsides. Certainly, we've seen things in the past about how locked in artists were with contracts that could be exploitative and what that meant for their music. And also, there are parallels in other industries as well. We've talked about the book industry before, and I think that's something that is somewhat similar, where if you sell a book to a publisher, you get an advance, and that helps you tide over until you complete the book. They expect you to have your own marketing presence, but in terms of booking tours, talking to people, getting larger stages, those are things that a publishing house can open doors for you that you wouldn't have necessarily been able to get by yourself on your own marketing.
Yep.
Any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
I know we'll hit versions of this topic throughout the pod. I think at the end of the day, I would like to think that it's the case that if you're just really good, that's usually the most important thing. If you're that good, you will find an audience. So don't forget that. Adding value and improving your abilities and improving your artistic output is never going to let you down.
I think I agree in principle, but at the same time, I've seen far too many examples where it hasn't been the case. And so maybe I'm a little more jaded than you are on this, but I'm willing to hold out hope.
Oh, no, there's hundreds of amazing artists that no one ever hears, and it's depressing. I just try not to talk about it that way because it's depressing.
Well, I think that we also need to remain committed, and in some ways, it enables us to be realistic, pragmatic, and also know that there is a path forward, and that with the luck and the algorithm and friends and family supporting you, and also maybe even a change in definition of what success means, That is something that we've talked about as well.
Yep, that's a big one.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to wrap up this week. But before we do, we have a big favor to ask of you. We would love for you to share an episode with a friend. We know that our listeners are music lovers, and we know that you know other music lovers. So if you have an episode that you really love, please share it with a friend, because we would love to have more listeners join our community.
If you liked this particular episode, this song, or you look through the episodes and you see a song that a friend of yours might be interested in knowing about, or if you want to just look through them on one of the playlists on the songs that we source from these different carriers, please look at the lists and maybe send the whole list to a friend, and they can then choose if there's a song they're interested in. We'd love you to share it with those who might be into it. Appreciate it.
Definitely. So thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. Sorry, my voice cracked. They're definitely cracked again.
I was like, oh, that ruins my next question. I was like, you had a very simple job, Elaine.
Another thing I gotta mute. Sorry, I need to pause for a moment, because apparently my family's blowing up my phone. I'm waiting for you to stop laughing so that I can actually get like a clean take on this.
I wanted to say set lists.
Thank you, Fletcher. I'm waiting for you to stop laughing so that I can actually get like a clean take on this.